Good. Then let us proceed to formation of a company. This is the third part. I have broken down the entire Companies Act into small parts. So this is the third part, formation of a company. Now, who forms a company? They are promoters. So promoters are people who come up with the idea of doing business. They arrange for capital, they draft the memorandum, articles, they enter into various agreements, they appoint personnel, they purchase assets, they conduct SWOT analysis. So there are many things which this person does besides incorporating a company. Now, how is the promoter defined under the Companies Act? Students, please note that a theory question can be asked on promoters. The definition is very important. You have to memorize the definition as it is. So, who is a promoter? Now, promoter means a person who has been named as such. He has been named as such in the prospectus. So the prospectus has written that this person is the promoter. So he is considered as the promoter. Or he is identified by the company in the annual return. So annual return is a form which is filled annually by the company, section 92. Okay, section 92 of the Companies Act. So he has been identified that this person is our promoter. So he is considered as the promoter. So he has been named as such in the prospectus. He has been named as a promoter, or he has been identified in the annual return. So keywords are named as such in a prospectus. So name will be mentioned in the prospectus. He is identified by the company in the annual return, or he has control over the affairs of the company. Okay, he has control over affairs of the company either directly or indirectly, maybe as a shareholder, director, or otherwise. So he may not be someone who is named in the prospectus, but he has control over the affairs of the company, either directly or indirectly, maybe as a control as a shareholder, director, etc. Or in accordance with whose advice, directions, instructions, the board of directors is accustomed to act. So he is a person whom we will consult before entering into any contract. So we will obtain his consent, we will obtain his advice before taking any major decision. So the board of directors is accustomed to interact, to consult that person. He is a promoter. Then under section 3, we discuss the provisions of formation of the company. Now, how many persons are required to form a private company? Just 2. How many to incorporate a public company? We need 7. OPC, we need just 1. Section 3A. Now, A, the letter shows that there is an amendment. Okay. Now, as per section 3A, if the number of members is reduced below the statutory limit. Okay, if the number is reduced below the statutory limit, like say for example, in case of my public company, the number of members has reduced to 5 due to any reason. Law says we will allow you to do business for maximum 6 months with this reduced number. But in those 6 months, you have to ensure that you reinstate this limit to 7. Because after 6 months, these members who were aware that the number has reduced, it has not been reinstated, they will be severally liable. So if the company continues business after 6 months, then the members who are aware of the reduced number, they shall be severally liable for all the debts which are incurred by the firm during that period. So after 6 months, they will be severally liable for debts of the company. Next, we have the mode of registration. What are the steps to incorporate a company? See, firstly, you need to decide on the name of the company. If it's a private company, it will end with the words private limited. If it's a one person company, it will end with the word OPC. Then you will also have the word private, OPC private limited. In case of public company, it will end with the words limited. Then after I decide on the name, I will have to draft the memorandum and articles of the company. Okay, I will have to also file these documents. Other documents which are to be filed along with the memorandum, articles of association, declaration by the person that all the formalities have been properly complied with. So we will file a declaration, address for correspondence, then the registered address of the company, a declaration from each subscriber. So declaration from the subscriber that they have agreed to purchase X number of shares, details of subscribers, directors. So we will, everything is online now, students. Everything is online. In my recorded video lectures, I have actually shown you how the entire procedure takes place. So we will decide on the name, we will draft the memorandum, articles of association, file everything online. Okay, so at the time of filling the form for incorporation, these documents have to be filed. Okay, so everything is a very simple procedure now. Everything is online. You need not go to the ROC. If they are satisfied, you will get the certificate of incorporation and the corporate identity number. So this is just a brief outline of the entire procedure. This is very, very important, students. This is very important for theory question. Furnishing false or incorrect information or suppressing, hiding or giving less information of certain facts at the time of incorporation. So at the time of incorporation, you gave either some wrong, false information or you suppressed some information. Then what will happen? You were caught at the time of incorporation. Then any person who furnishes that false or incorrect particulars, or he suppresses any material information of which he was aware, he knew about it, then he will be liable under section 447. Now the heading for section 447 is, you can write down, punishment for fraud. It's a general section applicable whenever you want to give someone some punishment for fraud. So you may be subject to fine, penalties, imprisonment also. So if any person furnishes wrong or incorrect particulars, wrong information, or he suppresses some material facts, and at the time of incorporation he's caught, if you are aware, then you will be liable under section 447. Students, you have to remember this as it is. Now, what if by mistake the company is registered? We didn't come to know that the facts are false. We didn't come to know that some information is suppressed. Then later law says that whenever you come to know about it, you can take action. So here the company came to know about it post incorporation. Now the company has been incorporated and then we came to know that the facts were given incorrectly, there is some suppression, etc. Where at the time of incorporation it is proved that the company had been incorporated by furnishing false or incorrect information, suppression of material fact information, or it has been incorporated by any fraudulent action, then the promoters, first directors, and other persons making the declaration, each shall be liable under section 447. Okay, so promoters, first directors, you have to remember this, student. This has to be present in your answer. Section 447, yes, you have to remember the section number, you have to quote the section number 447. So if later on it is found that the persons had provided false, incorrect information, they had suppressed some material fact, then, or they had incorporated the company by any fraudulent action, then the promoters, first directors, and persons making declaration, They will be personally liable. They will be liable for fraud. What are the effects of registration? See, you will become a body corporate. You will be clothed with legal personality. You will now get perpetual succession. See, because of registration with ROC, because of your incorporated status, you will now be considered as a body corporate having perpetual succession, limited liability. Memorandum and articles will now start binding the company and the members. The property of the company is, what should I write? Is it the property of the company or is it property of the members? Property of the company is property of company only, not members. Okay, so property of the company is property of the company only, not members. Liability, that is also liability of company, not members. Who manages the company? The board of directors. So the board of directors will manage the company. This is discussed under section 9. Okay, this you can write down, section 9. Can be asked as a theory question. What are the effects of registration of the company? So we have it as a body corporate, it has perpetual succession. You can also write it now has its own common seal. It has limited liability. Memorandum and articles bind the company and the members. Property and liability of the company belong to the company, not members. It's a separate person. It has, see, this actually talks about separate legal status. This actually talks about separate legal status. Management is done by the board of directors, so we need not worry about management. So students, that was something about incorporation, formation of the company. Now let us discuss something about shares. Shares are the smallest unit in which the capital of the company is divided. As per section 43, yes, this section number is important for exam. Shares may be either equity share or preference share. Now, what is the meaning of preference share? Preference shares means they have two preferential rights. First is right to dividend even before it is given to equity shareholders. Then you have right to repayment of capital even before it is given to the equity shareholders at the time of winding up. So they have a right to dividend even before it is given to the equity shareholders. They have the right to repayment of capital at the time of winding up, even before the capital is returned to the equity shareholders. That is about preference shares, preference share capital. What is equity? Equity share capital means capital which is not preference shares. So they do not carry any priority in as far as dividend is concerned or repayment of capital is concerned. They may be either with uniform voting rights or with differential rights as to dividend, voting. Now these are also known as DVRs. Okay, you will be studying about this in detail in CA Inter. Differential voting rights. Normally one share, one vote. But in case of DVRs, let's say for example, the company will decide 20 shares will give one vote. 50 shares will give you one vote. 60 shares, I'm writing as an example because this number depends on the company. So they don't want to part with their voting power. The promoters want to keep the voting power with themselves. So then in that case, they may issue shares with differential rights as to voting. So students, with that, we come to an end of the formation part of it. Now let us study memorandum and articles. Yes, important for exam questions are asked on memorandum and articles. Now, what is the meaning of memorandum? Memorandum will tell you what the company can do. and how it is to be done, what are the rules, what are the regulations, that is mentioned in the articles. Memorandum and articles, they are the basic documents of the company. Now, what are the key words that we need to remember? Memorandum is the charter of the company, they are rules of the company. It defines the constitution, means what the company can do, what is in the scope of powers. So company can perform only those acts which are authorized by the memorandum. So it defines the scope of powers of the company. Company can perform only those acts which are authorized by the memorandum. Any act which is beyond the power, then that will be ultra vires. Okay, so here you can write any act beyond the power of memorandum will be ultra vires, and hence it will be void. The memorandum is a public document. Okay, public document means that once it is filed with ROC, we assume that every person who is going through, who wants to deal with the company has knowledge of the memorandum. He has read it, understood it in the correct form. So we presume that anyone dealing with a company has knowledge of the contents of the memorandum. He has read it, he has understood. So the burden of reading it lies on the outsider. Because it is filed with the ROC, it's a public document, it is open for inspection by any member of the public on payment of prescribed fees. So we assume that you are aware of the memorandum, you have read it. This kind of presumed knowledge, okay, this kind of presumed knowledge is discussed under the doctrine of constructive notice. Okay, it is discussed under the doctrine of constructive notice. Constructive notice means we assume that you have read the memorandum, you have understood the memorandum in its correct sense, and you know whether the company can enter into these contracts or not. You have read, you are prepared. Now let's say that I have a garment manufacturing company, so it means that I can enter into contracts for manufacturing of garments only. Can I enter into contracts for making tires? No. Now let's say that you are a very big tire supplier. Okay, so you supply tires to my garment manufacturing company. It's an ultra vires act for me. I can refuse to pay. You will not be able to argue that, oh, how will I know it's an ultra? You should have read the memorandum. It's a public document. We presume you had knowledge of the memorandum. Now, what is the purpose of memorandum? Risk oriented and object oriented. Now, risk oriented, it will help the members to know the amount of risk that they are undertaking by investing in the capital of the company. Object oriented is basically for outsiders or for creditors of the company to know whether the contract which they want to enter with the company is within the object clause or not. So it will the risk oriented object will help the members to know whether the contract which they want to enter is what is the risk that they are undertaking by investing in the company, and for outsiders they will come to know whether the contract which they want to enter is within the scope of powers of the company or not. Okay, contents of the memorandum. The first clause is the name clause. Okay, the first thing that the company needs to finalize is the name. Okay, in case of private company, the name will end with the word private limited. In case of public company, it will end with the words limited. And in case of one person company, they will end with the word OPC private limited. There is one more company. The name need not contain limited or private limited. Yes, in case of government company, yes, the name need not contain the word limited or private limited, and also in case of section 8 companies. They have a privilege. Their name may or may not contain the word private or limited. Okay, after this we have the registered office clause. What is the purpose of registered office? Do you know the purpose? This is a place where communication takes place. So if members or ROC wants to communicate with the company, they will send the letters at the registered office. It is a place where books of accounts are maintained. We will also study later that registers, they are also maintained over here. Meetings are also generally held at the registered office of the company. In the memorandum, do we need to write the exact address or just name of the state? Just name of the state. Exact address you can communicate separately to ROC. Okay, so we can inform him separately the exact address. That need not be written in the memorandum. After this, we have the object clause. Object means, yes, what does it mean? Do you know the meaning? It is the purpose for which the company is incorporated. Okay, so it is the purpose for which the company has been incorporated. The object clause will state the objects, the purpose for which the company is either proposed to be incorporated, and any other matter incidental thereto, any other matter which helps the company to fulfill the main objects of the company. Then we have the liability clause. Liability clause will state whether the company's liability is limited either by shares or it is limited by guarantee. It will also state whether the liability is unlimited. Okay. Then we have the capital clause. Now, in the memorandum, the capital clause will also always mention details of the authorized capital. Okay, we will always write details about the authorized capital. This is the maximum that the company can raise. If they want to raise more than this, they will have to alter the capital clause. Next, we have the association clause, in which the subscribers to the memorandum they will promise to purchase at least one share. Instead of purchase, I better write the word subscribe. That's a better word. So they will subscribe they have promised to purchase at least one share of the company. So they should write the number of shares which they have subscribed, and it must be at least one. Then we have name of the nominee in case of OPC. So the name of the nominee will be mentioned here. Okay. Next, students, let us discuss the doctrine of ultra vires. What is the meaning of ultra vires? Ultra vires means beyond the powers. Company can perform only those acts which are within the powers given by the memorandum. Anything beyond that is ultra vires, it is void. It's void. Can the company enter into contracts which are ultra vires? Will the company be liable? No. So can I say that these are void? Company is not liable. Okay, so they are void. Company is not liable. We have a case law, Ashbury Railway Carriage and Iron Company Limited versus Ritchie. Now, what are the facts of this case? Now, the company, in its object clause, was authorized only to make, sell, lend on hire railway carriages. But the company entered into a contract agreeing to give loan to build a railway in Belgium. Now, Ritchie obtained that loan. Company later on said, no, it's an ultra vires act, we will not pay. Ritchie filed a case. But it was held that the object clause did not authorize the giving of loan for constructing railways, laying down of platforms, lines. They could only make, hire, sell railway carriages. So since it's an ultra vires act, the company is not liable. Company cannot be held liable even if each and every member gives his consent to this ultra vires act. No, ultra vires is always void. It cannot be ratified even with the unanimous consent of each and every member. So Ritchie lost the case. Now, what is the impact of ultra vires transaction? If a theory question is asked in the exam, what will you write? The impact is that the contract is void. Okay, the contract is void. Company cannot sue or be sued upon. Okay, neither can the company file a case nor can we file a case against the company. This act cannot be ratified. It cannot be ratified even with unanimous consent. Unanimous means each and every person gives his consent. Unanimous consent of members. If the company is not liable, then who will be liable? Of course, yes, you are absolutely right. The directors, the officers, in default, shall be personally liable. So, what is the impact? What will you write? It is void. The company cannot sue, company cannot be sued upon. It cannot be even ratified with the unanimous. You cannot even confirm it with the consent of each and every member. Directors, officers, they will be liable, company is not liable. Now, students, please note that a theory question is generally asked on ultra vires. You have to compulsorily write the name, only name of the case law. Very rarely they will ask you to explain the case, but yes, they can ask you to explain this particular case law. Ashbury, Railway Carriage and Iron Company Limited versus Ritchie. They may ask. It's an extremely important case law. So please write this. Please pause the video, write this. Done? Okay. Then we have articles of association. Now, articles, they are subordinate to the memorandum. So what are the keywords? What will you write in the exam? They are rules and regulations. They regulate the internal management. The keyword, the most important word is internal management, internal. They are the bylaws of the company. Bylaws means they are just like laws of the company. Bylaws means they are not imposed by the Companies Act. The company makes rules for itself. Okay, and those rules have to be followed. So they are rules made by the company restricting the company from carrying out acts in a particular manner or not carrying out certain acts. So in your answer, you should write their rules, regulations. They regulate the internal management of the company and also the bylaws. Not very frequently asked in the exam, so we are not going to discuss that in detail. The last and the most important concept, the doctrine of indoor management. Now, what is the doctrine of indoor management? Students, we had discussed the doctrine of constructive notice. Do you remember? We assume that anyone dealing with a company has knowledge of the contents of memorandum. He has understood everything. He knows whether the company can enter into a contract or not. But law says that you cannot expect him to have knowledge of the internal affairs of the company. Can you go and check whether the company is following the procedure properly or not? No, those doors are closed to us. This is the concept of indoor management. It is an exception to, you will write down, doctrine of, write down, constructive notice. Okay, it's the doctrine of constructive notice. See, we can be expected to have the knowledge of contents, but we cannot be expected to be sure whether those contents are properly followed by the company. We don't know whether the rules, regulation, procedures are properly followed by the company. That is the company's job. This doctrine protects the outsiders, because by no means the outsiders will come to know about the regularity in following the procedure. The doctrine is also known as Turkan's rule. Why is it known as the Turkan's rule? Because it is based on a case law, Royal British Bank versus Turkan. Now, what are the exceptions? Yes, students, very important for theory question. Exceptions to the doctrine of indoor management. It is very important. Not only theory, but yes, practical questions can also be asked. I have done a separate video on indoor management. You can check it out later. Knowledge of irregularity. If you have knowledge of irregularity, then you cannot get the benefit of indoor management. Means you knew about the irregularity. How come? That is because the person was a party to the transaction. If you were a party to that transaction, you should have known that the procedure is not properly followed. If you know that there is an irregularity, can you claim the benefit of indoor management? How will I know about the irregularity? You were there present. You should have known. There are case laws. Howard versus Patent Ivory Manufacturing, Morris versus Kansen. You have suspicion of irregularity. Okay, students, in the above cases, just mention the name of the case law. No need to explain it. You had suspicion of irregularity. Suspicion means you had doubts. If you would have investigated a little, you would have come to know about the irregularity, but you didn't even bother to investigate. See, we Companies Act cannot reward those who behave negligently. You knew that you had doubts, right? If you would have investigated, you would have found about the irregularity, but you didn't bother to investigate. You will not get the benefit of indoor management. No. You had doubts. You should have investigated. Now, the keywords over here are that the transaction is unusual or it is not in the ordinary course of business. So the transaction is either unusual, it is not in the ordinary course of business, you should have known. You should have had doubts or suspicion about irregularity. You didn't even bother to check. You will not get the benefit of indoor management. You can also write down these case laws, just the name is sufficient. Next, we have forgery. See, students, forgery is void ab initio. It's void ab initio. It's void right from the beginning. In fact, it is an illegality. See, we only give you benefit for irregularity, not illegality, as in the case of forgery. So you can write down that the benefit of indoor management is for irregularity, but forgery is nothing but illegality. So you will not get the benefit of indoor management when forgery is involved, because that's not an irregularity, it's an illegality. No benefit of indoor management. Can I say again? We are going towards the doctrine of constructive notice. It is out against the outsiders. What does law say? Law says that company, these are the key words, okay? Company cannot be held liable for forgery committed by officers. Okay, so the company cannot be held liable for forgery committed by its officers. Then who will be liable? Those officers will be personally liable. Why should the company be liable for their wrongful act? Indoor management will not apply to forgery. Wow, students, with this we have come to an end of the Companies Act. It was discussed in record time. I'm so glad. I'm so happy that we could record everything in a very time bound manner. We also took down notes for last minute revision. Just check whether these notes of yours are complete, whether your workbook is complete. I'll just pause and show you the last part and this part. All right, you have written everything. Yes, I'm so happy for you. You have done the right decision. You have taken the right decision of going through these revision lectures. You are also making last minute revision notes for yourself. All right, so students, with this we come to an end of our revision series on the Companies Act. Okay, we have covered the Companies Act. Now, next, let us revise the Limited Liability Partnership Act.